continue to bore you even a little bit more, but let's make a little bit of fun out of this. One of the things that I always do at all of these things is I never bring my own guitars. I don't bring any of my own guitars, any of my custom shop collection, any of my own rigs. I only use what's available at the store at that time. This here, and I chose this one specifically because we're Wild West Guitars, and this was a custom shop that I remember remember at the office, going down to Corona and seeing this thing painted, and just thought it was a little bit appropriate. And it has the 81, 85 EMG setup in it, which is my personal endorsement of choice. Slight plug off the side. And, but it's great. And to give you a little bit of history of Jackson Guitars and what it's really about, let's go back a little bit, back to 1977. Now, in 1977, there was this small shop right around the San Dimas area of California, and it was owned by a guy by the name of Wayne Charbel. Now, what they did at the shop was modify guitars. That was it. They modified stuff. People would bring in their Strats and their Les Pauls and whatever they just happened to have that wanted to be done a little extra special. So they would go down there and just modify the necks. They started creating what is called a compound radius. Now, they taught a company called Warmoth. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with them, a spare parts company. You can buy necks and bodies from them and stuff like that. The compound radius was taught to them by the first employee or the main employee, I should say, of Charbel, a guy by the name of Grover Jackson. And so they taught them, and they were doing compound radiuses on guitars, doing a lot of different stuff, modifying them, changing out the pickups, putting shims inside the necks, just doing stuff to make it high performance. And then right about the end of '77, Grover borrowed money from his family, mortgaged his house, got whatever it took to get together, and ended up buying the Charbel company. Because he said, let's make Charbel guitars. Wayne was not about it. So he bought it from him, kept the name, and then they released the Charbel guitars. And some of the original endorsees of Charbel guitars back then, the first was a guy by the name of Eddie Van Halen, who came in, and if you look at the back of the first Van Halen 1 album, you'll see the white guitar that's all striped up in black and stuff like that. That was one of the original Charbel guitars. And he actually hired Grover to build 4 guitars for him. So actually only one of them ended up being kept, and that was that same one. And that white one is now what people know as Frankenstein, because he repainted it red and did all this stuff. It's that same guitar. It wasn't a different guitar. It was just kept being modified over and over again by Ed himself after the fact, because he's not like the rest of us. He thinks a little odd. He likes to fix on his own guitars, likes to tweak on his own guitars, but he had a relationship with him. And good or bad or ugly, however that may be, they still kept the relationship for a while until Ed started getting a lot more popular, started doing things on his own, and designing a lot of stuff for other companies. Then after that, this, they started picking up artists like, Warren D. Martini in the days, and Jakey Lee was actually one of the original artists from Charbel. And he came in, and everybody's very familiar with the white Charbel with the black pickguard that he used for so many years on Bark at the Moon and stuff like that. And that was really a big forefront. So that was the first time that Charbel actually started making guitars. So set the record straight, Wayne Charbel never built the Charbel guitar. It was all Grover Jackson. And then, at that point, this guy back in 1980 came up to him and said, hey man, I want a guitar that looks like a shark. What are you talking about? Guy looked like Mick Ronson from David Bowie, short little dude, about 80 pounds soaking wet. Well, the kid was named Randy Rhoads. And he just got the gig with Ozzy. It was Ozzy's first solo attempt after getting canned from Black Sabbath. He didn't quit, he was canned. So, just to set that record straight as well. And he came up to me and said, I wanted a guitar that looks like a shark. I want the neck to go all the way through the body. I want some weird stuff, but you're the guy that knows how to do it. So they collaborated, and with Grover Jackson, with his assistants Tim Wilson, Mike Shannon, and Mike Eldred. A lot of people don't know a lot about Mike Eldred. He runs the custom shop for Fender still to this day. And Mike Shannon is still the king master builder of all that is still with Jackson Guitars and still building guitars right now for all the artists that I deal with, including myself. So he's the best. And so they got together and made what people see now in all the magazines. Randy with the big, huge, it was called then the Concorde. And they weren't allowed to sell it as the Concorde, so they had to change the name later. But Randy hated that guitar. The one that you see him all with the pictures and everything of that nature, he hated it because he was so little, he couldn't get his hands up the fingerboard. And he couldn't get to the higher register of the notes. The guitar was just too big for him. And it was heavy, and it was odd, but it was the first time that the compound radius was placed on a neck-through body with a 4-degree neck angle and all these major components, so the playability was ahead of its time, far ahead of the time. So after the rejection of that happened, they went back in and redesigned it. And those specs, the way they're redesigned, is how the RR1 is today. The regular RR1T, actually. And there's a few pictures of Randy with that one. Very few, because he died within 6 months after receiving the guitar. And it was the black one with the gold hardware and the gold pick guard and all that stuff. So that was the one he approved and loved it, loved it, loved it. There's very, very few live pictures of him playing it, but it was the shit. And the reason they started calling him Jackson was because Grover said, man, nobody will buy a Charvel if it looks like this. This is horrible. But we're going to call it Jackson, and we're going to say Jackson is the expensive stuff, and the Charvel is the affordable stuff that's more traditional in shape and figure, so to speak. And that was how it all pretty much began. And to this day, Pablo Santana, Mike Shannon, even Tim Wilson is still involved, and Grover pops in and out every now and then to do inlay work and stuff like that, but the family is still there. The majority of the same guys for 30 years have all been there, and they're still there together, and it's just, it's a great family feeling. And I just came from the custom shop before I came down here today, and it's great, man. It's family. And when I started working for them a few years ago, they welcomed me right in because I was an endorsee for 12 years before I started working for the company. And that was when I was with my bands Rorschach Test and N17 and stuff like that. We were out on tour with Marilyn Manson and Ministry and all that other hoo-ha at the time. And then I formed the band Autumn Zen a few years back, and they brought the whole band in. They just harnessed us and said, we love you guys, and they treated us like family, so therefore that's why I'm willing to go out on these clinic tours across the world discussing this, because I'm so proud, and I wish I could exclaim it more, but there is people under the age of 18 here and I can get busted, but I'm so effing GD proud to be a part of this company. It's sick. And with that factor, one of the things that people need to know is that Jackson is not just a shiny, polished guitar. They really are. They're 4-degree neck angles from the body for performance, for the sake that you can get Floyd Roses to get alternate, just a little bit more of an alternate action that goes from the neck to the body and has a little bit less resistance and has a little bit more play when you're messing around with the strings, or the springs, excuse me. And the compound radius. Does anybody here know what a compound radius is? Of course you do. We all know that. That's a given, dude. You know what a compound radius is?
It's the ratio of the neck and how the neck contours underneath and what it is to the body.
Very close. What it is that a fingerboard, as flat as it looks, they're actually round.
Yeah.
So it's the back shape of the neck, we actually use 4 major back shapes. A C shape, a D shape, the Rhodes solo, actually 5, and then the speed neck. And the compound radius is, you're right, because it is included within the back shape of the neck. But basically what it is that you have 2, let's say, for example, you have a Les Paul or a Fender, which has the same radius all the way down the fingerboard. Jackson has a 12-inch radius here up by the 3rd fret. By the time you get to the 16th fret, or the 12th fret, excuse me, it's a 16-inch radius. So it flattens out a little bit. It was designed so you could be more comfortable with your chording at the low end, and then when you get higher up, it flattens out so you have a little bit more playability and a little bit more room to shred. And with that factor, when you go to a music store now, aside of this one, because this store here, let me just give a few props. Is this not the most bizarre, incredible, high-end store you've ever been to? That is awesome. And they really know how to keep it up there. And with the selection of Jacksons, with the selection of PRS and Gibson, everything around the board is just gorgeous. And when you see the competitors of Jackson, you see these pointy shapes, pointy bodies, and strange body shapes. Remember, Jackson was the first to do it. They were the first to create that whole pointy, I guess you would say, message of guitars that went out there, the new trend or wave of guitars. They were the first.